Each year, 1/3 of all the food the world produces is lost or wasted. Not only does this mean an economic loss, it means that all of the natural resources used for growing, processing, packaging, transporting and marketing that food were also wasted. Imagine. 28% of the world's agricultural land grows crops that are wasted. That equals the total land area of China, Mongolia and Kazakhstan. Plus the water wasted in growing those crops equals the annual flow rate of the Zambezi or the Volga rivers, an amount that could cover all the world's household water needs. And as agriculture and fisheries expand into wild areas, overexploit natural resources, forest and marine habitats are lost, along with their biodiversity. Above all, wasted food emits some 3.3 gigatons of greenhouse gases. If this were a country, it would represent the third largest emitting country in the world. This cannot continue. With a future of more people and fewer resources, we cannot afford to throw our natural resources out with the garbage. Let's do something about wastage. Food producers can invest in better harvest and storage technology to avoid food loss. Food retailers can reduce prices of that imperfectly shaped vegetable and donate unsellable yet edible surplus grocery food to those in need. Food not fit for human consumption should be reused to feed animals. Individual consumers can be more careful shoppers, use better methods to store and recycle leftovers, and request smaller portions in restaurants. Small efforts add up. The food wastage pyramid is based on garbage. Policymakers can enhance the ability of producers, retailers and consumers to turn that pyramid around. For example, develop capacities of food producers to adopt post-harvest technologies. Revise those sell-by expiration dates so perfectly safe food is not discarded. Launch awareness-raising campaigns to inspire consumers to take whatever steps they can to stop food wastage. Reduce landfills through investments in transforming food waste into compost and biogas. The solution starts with you. Each producer, supermarket, household, restaurant and nation has a part to play. It will take the commitment of all to reduce food loss and waste, so that all the natural resources used to produce food will end up as meals for the world's population, instead of as garbage in landfills.
At present, we waste around 1/3 of the entire food supply, which makes no sense when you think about the fact that there's nearly 1 billion hungry people on our planet, and at the same time we're chopping down forests, why? To grow more food. So put those problems together and you can see that one of the easiest things that we need to do to tackle the global food supply problems and the environmental problems that we're facing is to reduce food waste. Under the Feeding 5000 banner, we do a number of projects, one of which is the Gleaning Network, where we take volunteers to farms to collect food that was going to be wasted or ploughed back into the field. I realised that there was a colossal amount of good edible food that was often being wasted at the level of farms, and that's because of cosmetic standards laid down by supermarkets, where if produce doesn't look perfect, it's very often very difficult for farmers to find a market for it, and it wasn't being used. At the same time, we were talking to food redistribution charities who deliver food, very often surplus food from the industry, and take it to people who need it. But they lacked fruit and vegetables as part of what they were offering to some of their partner charities. And we decided that those two problems actually fitted together into a perfect solution. We, the public, have more power than just affecting what we do in our homes. We have the power, and I would argue the responsibility, to demand change from the food industry, from those companies that we buy our food from. And we're saying, look, you go and buy your food every day in shops and in restaurants. How about asking the question, what do you do with your food waste? Do you destroy it, or do you donate surplus to charities? Do you have principles that mean that your farmers are wasting cosmetically imperfect produce? Because if so, we, the customer, would like to see food waste reduction as one of the things that you're offering us. And in fact, in the United Kingdom, that's one of the great success stories of our campaign. Since we launched in 2009, we've seen that ugly fruit and vegetables has become the fastest growing sector of the fresh produce market in the United Kingdom. And the National Farmers Union now estimates that over the last 12 months alone, 300,000 tonnes of produce that would have been wasted has now instead been marketed and sold to customers. They're happy because they can choose from a variety of different kinds of produce. Supermarkets are selling more stuff, and of course farmers are wasting less of their produce. The United Nations and the European Parliament have both asked for a halving of food waste over the next 20 to 25 years. That is something that obviously is hugely challenging, but it's an ambitious target and it is achievable. If we do manage to reduce our food waste, we can increase food supplies for those people who need it most, at the same time as reducing our environmental impact. And those two things are and should be global priorities. And having come from a place where campaigning on food waste 10 years ago was a very niche subject, we're now very pleased to see that the international institutions like the United Nations, like the European Commission and the European Parliament, have realised that reducing food waste is one of the global priorities.
Food issues are very important to NRDC, from food agricultural production to environmental justice, from food safety to food waste. But today I'm talking to you about food waste and what we can do about it. I started thinking about food waste back when I was climbing mountains. When you're carrying 30 days of food on your back or climbing to 21,000 feet, every ounce makes a difference. So before the trips, we would measure out the pasta and the beans and the oatmeal down to the tablespoon. And when we were on the trips, we would lick every pot so clean that we barely had to wash them. This is a picture of me licking a margarine wrapper to get that last calorie. But when I came home, those good habits left me. I would throw away a slightly bruised apple. I wouldn't eat the heel of a loaf of bread. I'd order too much in restaurants. Sometimes it even became a science experiment. We had a game we called Journey to the Back of the Fridge, where we'd look for the multicolored fuzzy mold growing on the old food. So like most of you, I always knew we wasted some food, but I never really gave it much thought. Honestly, how much did we think about the wasted food at today's lunch? Although I'm sure Diane has taken care of it and is going to do something good with it. But then NRDC's food program came up with this report that David mentioned, and what we found was shocking. 40% of the food that is grown in this country isn't eaten. That's almost half of the food that is grown is wasted. The average American family spends $2,000 on food that it doesn't eat. $2,000 on food that it doesn't eat. There is waste at the farm, in transit, at supermarkets and restaurants, at homes. It's everywhere. And think of the consequences of that waste. 25%, a quarter of all the water consumed in the United States, is used on crops that we don't eat. 1/5 of all the fish that are caught are thrown out before the boats ever get to the dock. And 1/5 of all that goes into a landfill is food. That's food that isn't even being fed to animals or being composted. This is crazy. It's like air conditioning empty buildings. And that is what got us thinking. You know, we've known about energy waste for a long time, from gas guzzlers to leaky buildings to inefficient appliances. And now there's an explosion of solutions. We have LED light bulbs, we have hybrid cars, we have green buildings. So we wondered, could we learn from those energy solutions to help us tackle food waste? And here's what we learned. Those solutions, those energy solutions, came about by design, because governments design better programs to create incentives and opportunities for efficiency. And as a result, manufacturers design products that do more with less. For example, today, the average refrigerator is bigger, is fancier, and it costs less in real terms than a refrigerator 30 years ago, and it uses 1/4 the energy. Not 1/4 less, 1/4 the energy. Consumers now have a whole range of energy-efficient appliances to choose from. And let me be clear, that didn't happen because there was some great cultural awakening about the dangers of energy waste, or because manufacturers suddenly realized, oh, we're spending too much on energy. They don't pay the bills, the electricity bills of their appliances. It came about because people like those here in this room, advocates, pushed the government to design better programs that would force manufacturers and encourage manufacturers to design better products. And that's a lesson we can learn here. Here's how. It starts on the farm. Every year, we waste 6 billion pounds of food. 6 billion pounds of crops go unharvested every year. According to one survey that was done, sometimes up to 30% of the food lies unharvested because of market fluctuations or pests or because it's not the right size, shape, or color. One peach farmer told us that 8 out of 10 peaches he can't sell, you couldn't even tell the difference. Can't we do something with the second fruit? Turns out there is, and I have a personal example from managing a coffee farm, a certified coffee farm, down in Costa Rica. We know that the world market likes coffee beans that are uniform, big, round, green, and nicely shaped. But about 5% of our crop every year, the beans are cracked and broken and black or have holes in them. Instead of throwing them away, we sell them to the local market at a reduced price. And I'll tell you the truth, I can't tell the difference between the export coffee and the local coffee. Here's another market solution. We know you can make juices and jams with misshapen fruits. It doesn't really matter what they look like when they're in a jam. England has a program called Rubies to Rubble, which sets up kitchens next to farmers' markets, which takes all the unsold fruit and makes them into gourmet chutneys. Can't those types of programs be repeated again and again? And of course, sometimes you can't have a market, but there's still good food out there. California started a program called From Farm to Family, which every year takes 125 million pounds of food and provides it to needy families. That's enough for 100 million families. Certainly other states could follow that example. Now, of course, most food does get harvested, and it goes to supermarkets, where a lot of it is wasted. The average supermarket wastes 10% of its food. The USDA estimates that supermarkets lose $50 billion every year on food waste. But it doesn't have to be this way. Jose Alvarez, the former CEO of Stop & Shop, realized that he could save money, increase customer satisfaction, and reduce food waste just by changing how he displays the food and a few other small things. You see, the traditional wisdom is that customers like to see plenty. Stack them high, watch them fly, the saying goes. So Stop & Shop employees would put several days' worth of food out to make customers see the plenty. The trouble is, it wasn't always fresh. Alvarez realized he could put out 4 fish fillets rather than 10. Or he could put out 20 avocados rather than 40, but maybe with a dummy layer, so to give the illusion of abundance. Within several months, customer satisfaction was up, waste was down, and Stop & Shop was saving $100 million a year. Now, obviously, there will be some waste in a supermarket, some spoilage in a supermarket, but that doesn't mean it has to be wasted. A friend, a local Hudson Valley farmer, told me that he went to his local supermarket and said, could he take what they were putting in the dumpster to feed his animals? And he was told, no, they can't do that without a policy directive from above. Well, that's the type of policies we can change. And then how about if you go inside the supermarket? How many of us have been confused by those expiration dates on the labels? Well, it turns out we're not alone. A survey showed that 60% of Americans get confused by those labels and throw out food prematurely. And with good reason. There's no standards or guidelines for those labels. They're just what the manufacturers want them to be. In the UK, they realized this, so the government got together with the manufacturers and standardized the labels. No more display by, sell by, best by, and all of that. That simple change, consumer confusion went down, and food waste went down. You see, these solutions don't have to be very complicated if they're well designed, and they can make a big difference. Let's think about other areas where a lot of food is served. We probably all remember being in school. Remember taking the school cafeteria, piling our trays with all that food that looks so good? We probably don't remember how much food we chucked at the end because our eyes were bigger than our stomach. Well, it turns out that the food service company, Sodexo, piloted trayless cafeterias at 300 schools and colleges around the country. And that simple move reduced food waste by 30%. How about sports stadiums? NRDC worked with 60 major league sports teams, including the New York Rangers, And they now box up the food that is prepared and uneaten and give it to needy families in the area. We've worked with the Yankees, who now compost their waste rather than sending it to the dump. And at a much, much bigger scale, many of us probably heard Mayor Bloomberg just a couple days ago establish a food waste composting program. He's going to start in Staten Island in the New York City schools. You see, this is following the hierarchy that many of us probably remember with garbage: reduce, reuse, recycle. First you try to reduce food waste, then you try to feed it to people, and if not to animals, and if not to compost. Sending it to the landfills is just dumb. But that brings us now to the final frontier of food waste. We, the consumer. The average American throws out 25 pounds of food per person every month. That's as much as food as I carried in my backpack for a month. For a family of 4, that's like taking $170 every month and shredding it in the Cuisinart. This is double the amount of food, or 50% more than the amount of food we wasted just a generation ago. Now, many of the trends that lead to this nation's obesity epidemic have also contributed to this increase in food waste. Portions have gotten bigger. The average cookie is 4 times bigger than it used to be. Even the average plate is 35% bigger. The joy of cooking, a recipe that used to serve 10, now serves 7. So does that mean we have to choose between obesity and food waste? No. In England, they started a program called Love Food, Hate Waste. They gave consumers some simple tips. Make a list. Buy only what you need. Freeze your leftovers. Most food holds up pretty well in the freezer. And don't necessarily trust those expiration dates. Trust your nose. It actually does pretty well for telling, well, the food is still good. And when you go to a restaurant, take a doggy bag and get a free second meal. Following just these simple steps and a few others, consumers in the United Kingdom reduced food waste by almost a fifth. Now, those are simple solutions. What if we had technology on our side? Imagine a refrigerator that could tell you what's in your fridge when you're at the supermarket, or that could tell you what's in your fridge that is on the verge of getting bad and give you a recipe of how to do it. Well, it turns out that fridge actually already exists. It's called a smart fridge with these apps and even more. Imagine how technology could help us if we had the right incentives and paid attention to food waste. So why does all this matter? Well, as I mentioned, 40% of our food is wasted. Think of the resources that would be saved if that didn't happen. Less air pollution, water pollution, climate pollution, toxic pollution. But in addition to that, if we were to reduce food waste by just a third, we would be able to feed all 50 million food insecure Americans their total diet. Let me say that again. All 50 million Americans who don't have enough food could get their total diet if we just cut food waste by a third. That's why we have to get going. Now, I've given you some ideas of some proven solutions, and you heard some others today earlier, and many of you in your own works probably have others. The question is, how do we scale those up? 2 key ways of how we can do that. One is to start the conversation. All of us heard President Obama a couple days ago announce a national goal of reducing energy waste by 50% by 2030. Well, the UK has already announced a goal to reduce food waste by 50% by 2020. Shouldn't every city, state, and our federal government announce food waste reduction goals and get us going? And the second thing we need to do is measure it. When we did our report, our wasted report, one of the most salient findings was that nobody measured food waste. From the farm to transit, supermarkets, or anywhere, nobody really knew what was going on. And we know that if you don't measure it, you don't manage it. So let's insist that we measure the food waste so we can start having a real step forward and take attention to this. Now, if we can do this, it all comes back to us. Not just us as consumers, but us as advocates. We have to be the ones to push the government, the food manufacturers, and everyone else in the food chain to pay attention to food waste. Now, I'm not saying that you should only eat what you can carry on your back, but honestly, it's a long way between licking a margarine wrapper and letting your food become a science experiment. We know the path forward. It starts today, and it starts with us. Thank you.